all our guests, welcome to Stockton. My name is Michael Tubbs. I have the honor of being the mayor of the great city of Stockton. I'm excited about today because we know, particularly in 2020, when democracy is literally on the ballot, where we're fighting for the best of American our values, and it's communities like Stockton that matter the most. It's communities like Stockton with working class people and people working 2 or 3 jobs, people who are doing everything right and still can afford rent. People who are doing all type of works like caregiving that being compensated for it, that really matter, and I really hold the greatness that is our country. And I'm happy today to be joined by former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who's running for president. Mayor Bloomberg reached out a couple months ago just to learn about what was happening in Stockton. He heard about the scholarship programs, he heard about the violent crime reduction, he heard about our bounce back from bankruptcy to fiscal health, he heard about some of the challenges we're having with affordability, he heard about the basic income demonstration, and he said, I think some of the answers for the problems facing this nation can be found in communities like Stockton. So in the course of the conversation, it became apparent that's one thing to hear about the problems, but it's another thing to actually come here and listen. So this morning, Mayor Bloomberg did just that. He spent time at a local coffee shop. He spent time at a round table hearing about kind of the 2 most pressing issues in our communities today, housing and housing affordability, and how do we increase the middle class and really eradicate poverty. So I'm excited because that conversation is happening here in Stockton, and Mayor Bloomberg will come and speak about a couple of policy proposals that really speak to the best of the American dream. Now in America, that one job should be enough, that things like caregiving are important and should be compensated, and that folks should be able to afford housing in the communities in which they live. So I'm also proud to announce today my endorsement for Michael Bloomberg for president. And to serve as one of the national co-chairs. Because again, I think in 2020, I want to be very clear about the stakes here, that democracy, that the rule of law, that who we are as a country is literally the decision we have to make in November. Amen. And to do that, we have to have a candidate with the record, with the resources, and the relationships to not just make sure we beat Donald Trump, but make sure something like Donald Trump never happens again. Amen. In terms of record, Mayor Bloomberg served 12 years as mayor of the city of New York. In that time, poverty did not increase. In that time, he innovated great programs around extending the earned income tax credit, building more affordable housing, creating more opportunity, and really making the American dream real for so many New Yorkers. In terms of relationships, since he turned out to being mayor of New York City, Mayor Bloomberg has been around this country and this world fighting for the things that matters. He's taken on the NRA. That's put gun laws on the book that make communities safer, that make sure that folks who have domestic abuse records aren't given access to guns, for doing common sense things, but hard things like fighting for universal background checks and investing in community gun violence prevention programs like the programs we have here in Stockton that's led to our 40% reduction in homicides last year. And then in terms of relationships, in politics, to get things done, it's one thing to yell about them, it's one thing to talk about them, it's a whole other thing to get it done. And you can't do it by yourself. So in 2018, instead of just talking about the White House and talking about the current president, Mr. Bloomberg went out and ensured that we were able to take back the House, so that there's a check on the executive's power. He's been throughout this country, investing in grassroots organizations, throughout this world, fighting for a climate, and again, fighting for the best in the American dream. So as I conclude, I would say, I think a lot of people don't know Mayor Bloomberg's biography. That he's a wealthy man now, but he didn't start that way. His father, at the height of his income, earned $6,000 a year. That when he went to Johns Hopkins University, he had to work to pay for college. That he was parking cars. That he was laid off from his first job after college. And in that time of being laid off, he created Bloomberg Enterprises. And I think, again, particularly in this country, we can be upset about things like poverty. We should be upset with things like massive inequality. We shouldn't be upset about success, because I know as a new father, I hope my son works hard. I hope my son does well. I hope that when he does well, he does like Mayor Bloomberg did, and doesn't forget about other people, but gets involved in the hard work of public service. So again, I'm excited to announce my support for Mayor Bloomberg. I'm excited to be in this fight with you all for, again, the American dream, this country. And I think we have a candidate here, again, with the record, the resources, and the relationships not just to beat Donald Trump, that's the floor, not the ceiling, but to ensure we live in a multiracial, pluralistic democracy. Today, Mayor Bloomberg said something powerful. He said that in a nation so wealthy, there's no excuse for people to be struggling as much as they are. In a nation with so much, that folks need some sort of income floor to ensure that they're able to have a foundation upon which to buy boots, to then pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And that's the type of country I'm fighting for. That's the type of country we're fighting for. And that's why I'm pleased to present to you guys today, Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd continue on. Sort of liked all of that. It's nice when people say good things about you. I've got to remind my daughters they could do the same. And it's certainly, all kidding aside, is an honor to have your endorsement. It's great to be here in Stockton. And thank you all for coming out, including this guy over here. I've been friendly with his father forever, and his grandfather I knew. And then all of a sudden, right in Stockton, California, he just shows up. Don't ask me how or why. Only because his wife is very smart and dragged him. No. Let me start by congratulating Mayor Tubbs on the birth of your first child, Michael Jr. And to mark that occasion, I have brought a small gift for the little guy. Even says it on the back. It is what every baby wants for Christmas. Mayor, I don't know if running for office at a young age will run in your family. I just hope that Michael Jr. doesn't challenge you or me in the next cycle. Tell him to wait a little while before he gets them. As you all know, Mayor Tubbs did not inherit an easy situation when he was elected. In 2012, Stockton became the largest city in America to file for bankruptcy. And there were two ways to respond when you're in that position. The first is the way our president does, learn nothing and go bankrupt 5 more times. I thought you'd find that funny, right? Bankrupt 6. I guess he found something that he was good at and he stuck with it. The second way was to respond to bankruptcy, all kidding aside, is to recognize what went wrong in the past and to lay out a plan for a brighter future and to work every day to achieve it. And that's exactly what Stockton has done under the leadership of Mayor Tubbs, and he's already made a very big difference in many people's lives. So congratulations and just keep it up. You're a role model for all of us. I have had a chance to work with a lot of mayors over the last, 17 years, 12 as mayor, and then I guess the last 5 or 6 when we're working in the private sector trying to help mayors. We have a program to train mayors, and so I've gotten to know an awful lot of them. I can just tell you Mayor Tubbs is the real deal, and this city is lucky to have him. He has one of the most ambitious urban agendas in all of America in terms of fighting poverty, improving schools, reducing homelessness, and improving affordability. Michael thinks big. He's not afraid to take risks, and he's determined to tackle the toughest challenges head on. He is my kind of mayor, and that's why I'm so honored to have earned his endorsement in this campaign. Now, just a few months ago, President Trump called California a disgrace to our country. A disgrace? Just think about that. The President of the United States, called the biggest state in the Union with the most diversity and one of the strongest economies, a disgrace. Well, I have to tell you, that bothers me, not as a Democrat, but as an American. The president is not supposed to be the head of a party, but the head of the whole country. And I'm tired of being of this country being a place where we don't talk to each other and where the president just divides us. I've been a number of times in the Senate office buildings where they have a dining room. Republicans and Democrats don't even have lunch together. They're supposed to work together. And the Senate and House are supposed to work with the president and with the judiciary. And if we don't do that, shame on us, but also we don't have the future that we want for our kids. We've got to stop pulling people apart, and we've got to focus on bringing this country together. And that's why I'm running for president, because we need to defeat Donald Trump. And let's start unifying, and let's rebuild this country. The fact of the matter is, we cannot afford 4 more years of the President Trump's reckless and unethical actions. He is a dangerous threat to this country, I think, our values, our national security, and I truly believe that if he wins another term in office, we may never recover from the damage. People say, why did you go from saying you weren't going to run to changing your mind and running? It is because I looked very carefully and I saw the trend that we were on, and I said, this just can't be, and I would never forgive myself if I didn't at least try to do something about it. We all know, however, that we can make progress on issues, some of these issues that are really important to the country. Why? Because we did it in New York, and I think we can do it in the whole country. We cut the murder rate in New York in half, and we could do that nationally. There's nothing we did isn't transferable to the rest of the country. We cut the incarceration rate by 39% in New York, even as it went up in the rest of the country, and we can do that nationally. We can raise graduation rates. We did it in New York City by 42%, while I might point out at the same time raising teachers' salaries by 43%. We can do the same thing nationally. If we want great education for our kids, we have to have great teachers in front of them in the classroom. You want great teachers, one of the things you have to do, not the only thing, but one of the things you have to do, is you have to pay them fairly so they can focus on our children rather than whether they're going to be able to pay the rent. And if we can build record amount of affordable housing in New York, I think we can do that across the country. I've always been a doer, a problem solver, not really a talker. I've never been to take on tough fights. This is another one of them. I've taken on President Trump and the NRA over gun violence, and I might point out that we won. So when people say, can you beat Donald Trump? There's a good example. We did beat him there. I've organized and co-founded something called Every Town for Gun Safety, and that's won stronger gun laws in states across the country against what the president's been trying to do. And I've taken on the president and some of the biggest polluters over climate change, and I've led an effort that has closed more than half the nation's dirty coal-fired power plants. If we can do it, with that issue, we can do it with a lot of things every place. I've also taken on President Trump in something that I'm very proud of, and the tobacco industry over e-cigarettes used by our children. We are now winning some battles, including down the road in San Francisco against Juul. One of the fights I took on as mayor, and that I've continued to work through my foundation, is breaking the cycle of poverty. Today, our campaign is releasing a few of the policies that will make the federal government a full partner for leaders like Michael Tubbs in their work to make housing more affordable and to raise incomes. Before I review some of the details, let me just make one overall point. As president, my job will be to move all America ahead, and that includes committing our country to new and innovative ways to combat poverty. There has to be a war on poverty, a successful one, an innovative one, and one that engages local leaders like Mayor Tubbs. And I think a lot of the times we've had these national programs, we didn't go and down to where the rubber meets the road, and that is the mayors of these cities that really deliver services. Let's start with affordable housing, and let me put things in perspective. Over the past 2 decades, while American families' incomes have stayed flat, the average rent has gone up across this country by 50%. Just think about that. 2 decades, 20 years, no increase in incomes, rent up 50%. How do you think people are going to pay their rent? Earlier this year, the home ownership rate for black families fell to its lowest level since the early 1960s, back when federal housing policy blatantly discriminated against black families. So this really is a crisis, and the proposals that we're releasing today, I think, will help address it. To start, we're going to substantially increase the construction of affordable housing, both through tax credits and direct government spending, just as we did in New York. It cost money, but it turned out to be the right thing for New York, and New York thrived on it. We're also going to increase the supply of affordable housing by providing cities with a major new source of funding if they eliminate restrictions on zoning, particularly near transit areas, just as we did in New York. That let people who couldn't live close to where they were working get in a reasonable and an affordable rate of time, and affordably to their job and back home. We're going to increase the number of Section 8 vouchers and make it easier for people who use them wherever they want to live. And we're going to increase the supply of supportive housing available to those who are homeless or need services, just as we did in New York. We'll also expand federal grants to cities that implement effective programs to prevent and reduce homelessness, problem that almost every city across the country is suffering with. In New York, we cut street homelessness by 28%, and a pilot program we created to prevent homelessness helped reduce shelter use by 20% for participants in the program, and it saved more money than it cost. Now, while we certainly didn't solve the problem, homelessness is still a problem in New York, it's a problem every place. Another program that we created, which provided rental assistance, also showed promise in reducing homelessness before it lost state funding. So we know how to make progress on this issue, and now we want to be able to do it nationally, and we think if given the opportunity, we really can. We also fund cities. We'll also fund city programs that pilot programs that help more families afford a down payment on a home, and it helps reverse decades of discriminatory housing policies. At the same time, we'll strengthen enforcement of the Fair Housing Act and fair lending laws to stop discrimination. Now, all of these steps will make housing more affordable and more available, but to fight poverty, we need to do something even more basic, and that is raise incomes. And we should start with the most straightforward change, raising the minimum wage. We did it in New York. In New York, the minimum wage has gone up to 15%. Across the country, nationally, it is $7.25. You cannot live on $7.25 no matter how hard you work, and you certainly can't put something under the tree at Christmas time. Raising the minimum wage, we think, will lift more people out of poverty. But even that's not enough, and that's why I'm also proposing a dramatic expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit. I've always been a fan of the Earned Income Tax Credit, particularly the program we have now, which helps parents with children at home. But unfortunately, it does almost nothing for those without young children who are struggling to get by. And we should change that and make it much fairer for everybody. Everybody in this country needs to earn enough money so that they can enjoy the great American dream. And we're going to lower the age of eligibility so more people can qualify for it. And we'll support pilot programs in cities and states to broaden eligibility to new groups, including those who do work and are paid, but not paid enough. In New York, we'll help more people get the EITC. In New York, we helped more people get the Earned Income Tax Credit by filling out the application for eligible workers and then mailing it to them. So all they had to do was sign and return it. And it made a very big difference. An awful lot of people got on the rolls to have that extra $4,000 or $5,000 a year, which is a very big amount of money to the people that qualified. As president, I'll go even further by creating automatic enrollment so people who are eligible actually receive the benefit without having to deal with all the paperwork. Sadly, one of the things we often do is, it sounds good, we pass a program, but we make it difficult for people to use it so we don't have to pay for it. Shame on us. If we're going to have a program, let's make it so that everybody that qualifies can enjoy it. I believe in a simple idea. If you work full-time, you should earn enough to live on, a living wage. There is dignity in every job, and there should be dignity in every paycheck as well. This is America. We value hard work. We also are a compassionate country, and we should make sure that those that try to do the right thing, if they need a hand up, let's give it to them and let them participate as well as everybody in this room. Now, many people living in poverty struggle to find steady employment, and many of them are raising young children, and we have to do something to help them too, and we will, by increasing the child tax credit and expanding its eligibility and making it more fully refundable so it benefits the poorest families. One of the best investments I think that we can make in America's future is helping these kids become the leaders of tomorrow. I always believe that America is at its best when we work together to find meaningful and lasting solutions to the big challenges that we face. And that's what I would do if I'm in the White House, and I'm honored to have earned Mayor Tubbs' full support. Finally, let me thank you all for coming out and spending a little of your Wednesday with us. And if you know anyone with a new baby, you know what to get them for the holidays now. All the best, and God bless. And for the press, we'll take a few questions. I would just like to first, a couple questions from the local press, and then we'll take it from the national. Local press?
Sacramento media.
That's close enough, I think.
Thank you for coming. I had two quick questions. People want to know, how much the average cost is for a gallon? How much does it cost?
I was talking about that the other day, that when I was mayor, we very carefully, every year, I had to check on eggs and milk. I think a gallon is now about $5.
Okay.
Is that close?
Sounds right.
Yeah. When I first came to New York, I remember applying for a job, and I said I couldn't afford what they were offering, and I showed them my $120 for rent budget and $5 for food. And I cooked for about 3 years all my own meals. It was good food, I liked it. I overburned my French toast, but that's another issue.
And just as far as campaigning in California, you made this a key strategy for you to skip the early states.
Yes.
And California has the most number of delegates in the nation. Can you walk us through your strategy to winning in California, and why you think a progressive liberal state like this would support a moderate candidate like you?
Well, number one, we're skipping the 4 early states, 2 elections and 2 caucuses, only because I decided to go in much too late to build a ground team and get in there. President Obama told me that he went 99 times to Iowa. We didn't have time to do any of that. So those states are important. They have delegates, and they are Americans, and I care what they think, and I will certainly visit them and try to find out. In fact, I visited all of them earlier. But skipping them is the only practical ways to do it. And then you focus on Super Tuesday and the 2 elections after, one of which includes California, the first one. Why do I think California would vote for somebody like me? Because Californians understand nothing's simple. You have to have real solutions, and you have to have evolutionary rather than revolutionary change. This is a great state. It's got a great economy. It doesn't want to throw away what it has. It just wants to make it more available to more people and more consistent. And there's no reason why I can't explain to people what I want to do, and hopefully they'll listen. I want to have something to help them.
Well, I think especially, and I think that's why the conversation around ending poverty, raising the minimum wage, and affordable housing are so important, because those are issues facing California. As the Golden State, we're also the top state for poverty and child poverty. We're also top state for lack of affordability. So for working with Mayor Bloomberg's team and sitting down and saying, well, if we're going to do something in California, it has to start with housing affordability, and ending poverty. And I think from the proposals we've heard today, from increasing Section 8 vouchers so people can live where they want to live, to enforcing the Fair Housing Act, to just incentivizing folks to build those transit areas. You have a real comprehensive plan to make sure that folks can afford to live in the Golden State. Now, living in the Golden State is a bankrupt. And then I think on the poverty front, the earned income tax credit doesn't sound sexy, so I want to make it simple for people. It's essentially cash in people's hands, and cash in people's hands who are contributing. But I think what's revolutionary and exciting about, or evolutionary, excuse me, or what's exciting about what Mayor Bloomberg shared is this idea that there's so many people in our economy who do work that's not compensated. I think about caregivers in particular, and mostly women of color, who are working incredibly hard, but are being compensated for that. So to have a candidate say, you know what, I see that. That work has value, that work has dignity, and that work deserves a paycheck, I think is important. And I think as we go to places like Stockton, again, of all the presidential candidates, he's the only one that's been to Stockton, recycled. To have these conversations, that's going to be the key to winning, because Californians, we're the Golden State, we're a progressive state, but progressive means progress. Progressive means moving forward. And I think, again, someone with a record, the relationship, and the resources would do really well in the state, particularly because we're talking to real issues. Again, a $15 minimum wage, again, extending the earned income tax credit. Again, making sure child givers and students are compensated, and really making sure that we provide an income floor for everyone, which I think is consistent with California values.
Well, let me also add one other thing. New York is probably the most progressive state.
No, California.
New York is as progressive as California. That's the most I'll give them. And I was elected 3 times in New York State, and then around the state was reasonably popular. But one more local press.
Mr. Mayor Michael Bloomberg, PCRA 3 Sacramento. Do you still believe that your stop and frisk policy in New York was an effective law enforcement tool?
Look, we tried a lot of things. My whole focus was on reducing the murder rate. In looking back, and certainly in the 3rd term, I think it got out of hand, which maybe I should have paid more attention, but it got out of hand. When we realized that it was too much, and when we cut it back a little bit, crime went down rather than up. We then cut 95% of it out before I left. And then I said, look, I made a mistake and apologized for it.
Stop right here. So there was a report last week that came out that showed that a lot of Californians aren't familiar with who you are. And so
That's why I'm here.
And so, yeah, so I'm wondering how much of that, factored into today's visit to the state. What people you want, what you want for people to know about you as well.
Well, look, what I want them to know about me is I think I'm hardworking, honest, whatever. I believe what I believe. And if you want to know what I would do, I would urge you just to look at what we did in 12 years. And it wasn't me. The key was the team that I put together, and they did it. But, I was part of it. If you want to know about the future, you got to look to the past to have some guidance. We don't know what the problems of tomorrow are going to be, but we can look to see how the people who are going to lead us and face those problems performed in the past.
And how did you choose Stockton as one of your stops today?
Well, this happens to be one of the most influential new young mayors around the country. We've met. He offered to endorse me, and I had to think long and hard about that one. No. I was honored to come here.
Just going back to the question about stop and frisk, I mean, you're bringing with you the legacy of stop and frisk 12 years ago. How do you come into a state as diverse as California with that legacy?
Well, look, I did what I did. I have continued after being in office, fighting the NRA, fighting against states that don't have rational gun laws for background checks and red flag laws. I've continued to work more, I think, on bringing down the murder rate even after I left office than before. The policy we had, I apologize for, because in the end, it turned out we could have done something different. But people want results. I don't think there's anybody in California that doesn't think the objective of bringing down the murder rate, particularly in poor communities, isn't a good idea. And we're going to continue to focus on stopping this carnage of young people, innocent people that are getting killed. Yes, sir.
Absolutely, I think it's a fair question. And again, it's no surprise to anyone. I'm young, I'm black, my father's still incarcerated, so the issues about criminal justice are deeply personal for me. And what I would say, and me and Mayor Bloomberg had this conversation, even before he was running for president, I think we all recognize now in 2019 that stop and frisk is not a good policy. It's terrible. Courts have decided, he's apologized, he's moved on. I think 2 things for me. Number one, if you look at every candidate in the field, there's an issue with criminal justice. You have folks who wrote the '94 crime bill, which created mass incarceration. You have folks who voted for the '94 crime bill. You have folks who supported Ronald Reagan. So there's not a candidate in 2019 who has a criminal justice record that's where we are today. But I think the sign of a good leader is one who apologizes, one who goes, and doesn't apologize yesterday in a room where everyone agrees. This man went to a black church in Brooklyn with many parishioners who are probably stopped and frisked, and had to look them in the eye and say, I apologize, I was wrong, I'm sorry. And I also think that given the complexity of criminal justice, it's important to look at the totality of the record. So stop and frisk was terrible, but if you look at the decrease in incarceration, if you look at the decrease in murders, if you look at the increase in community policing, those are all good things. So I also think, particularly in this election, we have to look towards the future. And what we have right now is someone who is stopping, frisking, and putting kids in cages. We have someone right now who has white supremacists marching down streets. We have someone right now who vilifies and demonizes and others so many people, and I'm committed, and I'm part of this campaign because we will put forth criminal justice policies that acknowledge past harms, but look towards the future in terms of how to create a more just and inclusive criminal justice system that keeps us all safe and also repairs some of the wrongs that have been committed by many folks over many years in this country.
Mayor Bloomberg, you're on Michael Tubbs.
You didn't mention universal basic income in your proposals. Why don't you support that? Or why don't
I
you
know
support
I do support it. There was a litany of things, and I just didn't get to it. But I do think.
And also the wealth tax on people like yourself.
Right. First, universal basic income. There's a number of ways of trying things. Some things work. I remember in New York we tried something where we had a cash grant for doing the right thing in families. We copied the program from Mexico where it was very successful. Unfortunately, it did not work in New York because we have so many other programs going on at the same time. So we stopped it and used the money for something else. In terms of the wealth tax, number one, when I was mayor, I did something that wasn't exactly popular. I raised taxes dramatically, particularly on the wealthy, but a little bit on everybody, because we all had to share in buying the services we need, the facilities we need, and paying the people that we need to provide the services that we want, whether it's teachers or firefighters or police officers or sanitation workers or whatever. You want good people, you've got to pay them. If you want to pay, and to pay them comes out of everybody's pocket, okay? So I'm not opposed to taxing people at all, not opposed to taxing the wealthy. I spoke out very strongly against the part of the tax bill that Trump and Congress passed because I thought the wealthy, like me, did not need a tax cut. We're doing fine, thank you very much. We needed that money for infrastructure. And one of the things we have to do is go down and look at all these programs and then figure out how much is going to be financed with a deficit and how much is going to be financed with tax revenues that come in, and then try to allocate it in some fair manner over so that everybody feels the pain a little bit. But there's no question, if you take a look at the middle class, they can't really afford more taxes. One of the numbers I showed before, wages haven't gone up, rents are up 50%. That tells you probably as much as you need to know. One last question to you.
President Trump has attacked California on the issue of homelessness multiple times. If you were elected, what would your plan be to deal with that particular issue?
Well, the first thing I'd do is get rid of Donald Trump. That would solve your problem, okay? Look, homelessness is a very big problem all over the country. Not all, most places, particularly in big cities. In New York, homelessness was certainly a problem while we were there, particularly among certain groups. Veterans, you have a lot of homelessness among veterans because they have some emotional problems and have trouble coming back from the war and integrating back into society. And so we had a number of special programs for groups like the military. What we have to do is find a ways to keep people from falling into homelessness and them getting the services they need. So we have in New York, if my recollection, the numbers was something like it's about 80,000 homeless, but only 3,000 are on the streets, which in a population of 8.4 million is pretty small. And most of those, I can tell you, if we saw somebody on the street, we instantly sent a team to talk to the person, try to convince them to come into the shelter system where they could get a shower and new clothing, and maybe we could take them back to their family and try to reunite, which actually worked in a number of cases. And whatever number of cases it did, it reduced the homeless population that you had to deal with. But the 3,000 want to stay out pretty much, and we certainly shouldn't walk away from them, but we tried to deal with them as a different group that are willing to come into the shelter system. Our experience was, if you try to reunite the families, it's the first step, but it's a good step because it reduces the rest of it. And then the other thing you've got to remember is homeless people tend to have more than the problem of just not a roof over their head. An awful lot of homeless people do have real other problems. And so you have to have a team of people to come and work with each homeless person, not just a housing person, but there's mental health issues, there's physical problems. There you go on. Anyways, thank you very much for having me. And no, we got to go. Okay.
This is the mayor.
I don't know what possessed me to do that. She seemed like a nice person.